and its attorney have been trying to take my home. And so I have, Ms. Peterson has had routine contact with staff here at the county. We've tried to work with her. In this case, it's been a process of 6 years. When she did purchase the property, she was aware of the special assessments that came. That wasn't something that was added to a property. After the fact, in talking with representatives from Glendon has worked with this property owner from the standpoint of offering property tax relief, but Ms. Peterson was aware of what these special assessments were when she purchased. And again, as we've told her numerous times, this is an issue between her and Glendon, not necessarily something with the county.
Okay, thank you, Steve. We'll move into employee recognitions, and we have two employee recognitions today. Our first one is Anna Becerra. She has been with us for 20 years, and we got Holly Warner is here to accept for her. I'll come over here.
Okay. Can I say a couple? Thank you. So yes, Anna's been with us for 20 years. The last 3 years, she's been a case aide at Social Services, supporting our home and community-based waiver case managers and our Mint-Choices assessors. And prior to that, she spent 17 years as an office support specialist at Social Services. So Anna does an excellent job. She has many qualities, but one that really stands out with her, is her positive attitude, and she's always willing to go above and beyond whatever she can do to support the staff that she works with. So we really appreciate her. Thank you.
Will you be sure to tell her thank you for her dedicated service for 20 years from all of us?
I absolutely will. Thank you.
This next one may take a while. Our county administrator, Steve Larson, 25 years. My first interaction with Steve was when he was the second in command over at the juvenile center in the secure detention area, working under Barry, right? Am I correct in that? Yeah. And so when Brian Berg decided to retire, we were in search of a new administrator, and Steve applied, and so did several other very qualified candidates. One thing that most people don't know is in the first round of interviews, Steve really blew it.
That is not an understatement.
No, it's not an understatement because we pretty much told him so.
Here's where you're supposed to say good things.
Well, the good things are to come.
Okay.
So anyway, then in his second interview, Steve just really shined, and since that interview and since the hire, I can say the same thing. He's just constantly shined for our county, and it's people don't realize the amount of time this man spends. We as commissioners, I can get emails on Saturday nights, Sunday nights, Saturday mornings, 11 o'clock Monday night, and I just want to tell him, why don't you go to bed? But he's, and of course we all know what his leadership was this last year during the pandemic was just a brilliant performance, and I think you have an awful lot of your county department heads that think very highly of you, and couldn't be happier to have you as our administrator, and congratulations on your 25 years. And I think my fellow commissioners also want to say something, so.
So if you've been here 25 years, that means I was 12 when you started in Clay County. And I know you've done 37.
37. Thank you.
I know you have done some phenomenal work in the areas that you've really focused on, and that can be seen in how people speak of you. You're highly respected among your peers, so thank you for your work there. But I said this to you last week, that I wanted to apologize for jinxing the fact that I think that I was chair when you were hired, and I had just had Greeley and told you, I swear we're not usually this busy. We were running around from all sorts of different committees, and I said, it's not usually this busy. And so last week I said, I'm really sorry that I jinxed it. It has only gotten busier. And I concur with Kevin. I'll randomly send you an email whenever I get to it after hours, only with the hope of not forgetting about it on my part, and then I'll get a page-long response from you on the weekend. And so you are always quite dedicated, and we really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, myself, I've only been working on the 2 county administrators, and when Brian Berg left, and it was always, you got to measure up, or your next one's got to measure up to that. And I really feel that, Brian Berg did a great job, and I think you were really following his footsteps and doing a great job too. And I think you've met the qualifications that we were looking for. And thank you very much for your service.
Thank you.
I know I'm the new kid on the block, but Steve, it has been a delight to work with you so far. This man is always happy. I've never seen him without a smile on his face. And yesterday, when I called at 12:30, I yelled at him for not taking a lunch break. So yelled might be a strong word. But yeah, he is tenacious in the work that he does for our county and very well respected. Thank you, Steve.
Was the other new kid. When I got this position, I talked to my predecessor, Grant Whalen, and he told me there are 2 things that make this job a pleasure. One is the staff, which I already knew because I'd worked with people at Clay County in my previous position, and the other was Steve. And he said something that really confirmed it to me. He said, he is as good as Brian Berg. And I'd worked with Brian, and I figured if you're as good as he is, I'm tall cotton. And to echo some other things that I've already seen, the after-hours emails and the comprehensive effort to keep us apprised of things that we need to know before we have an issue with it. You're on top of things, and Kevin's right, your staff is supportive of you, and they look to you for leadership, and you give it back. And you do it in a congenial way that I think people like working here. And we certainly, as a commission, like having your services and leadership here with the county. So thank you, congratulations. I was a lot older than 12 when I started. In fact, I think I was older than you when you started. But I hope the next 25 years is as productive.
Very good. Commissioner Gross brought up Brian Berg before that, and I can go back one more to VJ Sethi as well. And I'll tell you what, Clay County, certainly in my tenure here, has been real fortunate to have the administrators that we've had. It's every one of them have been just remarkable in their efforts. So Steve, what we have here is a plaque presented in grateful recognition for 25 years of dedicated and outstanding service to Clay County and its citizens. And this is on behalf of all of us commissioners. Oh, you want a picture? Okay. I need a picture.
And I don't want a photo bomb.
There we go. Thank you.
So, everybody's had an opportunity to talk, and we're not going to let you. You have plenty of time towards the end of the meeting in your committee report.
Okay.
But thank you, Steve, for what you do.
Thank you for the kind words.
Okay, we'll move into,
Comment.
oh, yeah.
I neglected during our consent agenda to comment on the fact that we reappointed Clarice Schmidt to the
Oh, yes.
Minnesota Red River Valley Development Association. And Clarice has really represented Clay County on a multitude of boards statewide. She currently serves on the Minnesota State Fair Board. She's served on Extension and all sorts of committees. And I really appreciate the Schmidt's presence in Clay County. They're a great farm family, but also advocate for us. So I just want to, on behalf of myself, thank Clarice for her continued service on that board.
Very good. Thank you for those comments. She's been around and done an awful lot for our county, so. Okay, we'll move into approval of the bills and vouchers.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Gross, second by Commissioner Ebinger. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. We have the minutes from January 19th.
Move for approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Ebner and second by Commissioner Kaylee. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion carried. We will now go into our update on COVID-19. Kathy, and you brought Jamie with you again today? Thank you, Holly, for coming this morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners.
Good morning.
So I've handed out the data on our cases and information. So Clay County, our total positive cases are 6,667. And then we have our confirmed and probable cases, and then new cases reported as of February 1st were 2. Total deaths remain at 84. And our 14-day case rate, which is the number that throughout this pandemic we've been utilizing to assist the K-12 schools in making decisions, and that's at 36.94, so that's really low. At one point in time, it was well over 100, so those numbers are really looking really good. Our total positive cases in Minnesota, 462,528. Went up just a little bit, 727 new reported cases. Cumulative deaths are 6,202. There was 2 new reported deaths as of February 1st. And then you can see the total cases requiring hospitalization, 24,352, and 5,045 were in ICU. Now, this is across the state. And then no longer needing isolation. Our vaccine administration data, so right now in Clay County, the number of people that have received at least 1 dose of our vaccine is 5,565. So that we continue to get vaccine out to individuals that are in those priority areas. And the total number of a completed vaccine series is 1,272. So again, numbers are still low. Of course, we'd like to see a lot more, and this is just based on vaccine availability. So we're getting every amount of vaccine that we receive, we get that out within 3 days as required. 90% needs to be out within 3 days, so.
Kathy,
so in-
before you, just on that, so when somebody receives the first dose, how long after that are they considered to be somewhat immune? Because you actually have some immunity before you have the second shot, aren't you?
Yeah, they're estimating it to be about 50% after the first dose. So you have a little bit of immunity, but again, that's just kind of the jumpstart dose, and then you get the second dose, which allows you up to about 95% is what they're saying is the response rate, and that's for both Pfizer and Moderna. So the 50%, the second dose, it's a couple weeks where you get the full immunity, and so that would be the same with the first dose as well. So a couple weeks after, where you're getting 50% for first dose and about up to 95% for that second dose. And then Minnesota is the 441,922 number of people that have at least the one dose, and 116,248 people that have the completed, so the people that also have the second dose. And Jamie will talk about our vaccine administration and some information in regards to that in just a little bit. So she'll talk about where we're at locally. So you see the same report on the second page that we just went over, the number of cases, deaths, those out of isolation. Clay County right now has 99 cases, so that's really low. That's the lowest we've been in a long time, so that's great. We're seeing less active cases that we're following. And then the cumulative hospitalizations, so 275 cumulatively in Clay County for hospitalizations. And then 74 of those Clay County residents that were in ICU. And then we see the number of vaccines again that were shipped to Minnesota. So 653,175, that's on the second page. And then 181,200 for the long-term care, because we also had the pharmacy, the federal pharmacy program. So just as a reminder, those pharmacies that signed up to be a provider were distributing vaccine to our long-term care facilities and assisted living. So we had both pharmacies in our area that were providing vaccine to the long-term care and assisted living. So, the statewide data is, people with one dose, 8%, people with a completed vaccine series statewide, 2.1. So again, we really want to see more vaccine allocated to Minnesota, and then the distribution. They're working at the governor and state level to try to get the vaccine distributed as soon as we get it. And then in Clay County, it's people with one vaccine dose, 8.9%, and with the completed series, 2.0. So again, trying to get the vaccine out. We're working with our partners, the two clinics in Moorhead, and so they're assisting as well to get some of the vaccine out. One of the priority groups is the 65 plus, so they're working with us to get vaccine out to their patients. That they aren't doing mass distribution in those clinics, but they're working with the patients in those priority areas and getting the vaccine out as well. Any questions on until we go into our local vaccine distribution? Any questions on the numbers? The next graphs are, again, you see the Clay County cases reported by week. So it gives you kind of a snapshot of the cases that, we started with back in March, and then the real spike in those cases, October and November, and again now going back down. So that's really good to see the spike declining. And then also the deaths. We had a lot of deaths at the beginning of our pandemic. We experienced more deaths than come October and November, and now we're not, where that spike has declined. In the last page is cumulative ages, or cases by age group, excuse me. And so you see the cases as we have looked at before, with the highest spike in that younger age group. And then you see the active cases by age group. So you see there's a spike now in the 45 to 49 age range, and then still in that 20 to 24. So the active cases certainly can vary in who has active cases and their age group. So that's interesting to see the various age groups that are spiking. And then on the last page is just the hospitalizations that we did talk about. Again, this is statewide. So the number of hospitalizations and the number of ICU, people in ICU, that's that green line. So the number of people that were in ICU, this is the Minnesota data. So total hospitalizations, that's cumulative. And then the total ICU hospitalizations, so as that increased, you can see the cases admitted to the hospital and ICU on the lower graph. So it kind of depicts where we saw cases at the beginning, where we saw the spikes again, and then now the decline. And I've mentioned before, locally, as we meet with our hospitals weekly, their numbers are really quite manageable. They're not seeing any spikes, and so hospitalizations at ICU beds are being managed quite well, with numbers not spiking at this point. Any questions on the data? Okay, I'll let Jamie talk about our vaccination information.
Okay, so last week, we received about 1,000 doses, and we were able to administer all of those doses last week through our clinic. So we continue to plan to do that as well. Part of it is, when you look at the percentage in Clay County and Minnesota, we continue to ask for vaccines, saying that we have a high Phase 1A population to meet those needs. In Minnesota, the Phase 1A is still our priority for public health, but we're allowed to invite childcare centers and E12 educators as well to those clinics. So when we ship out, the invite to our healthcare providers, if we don't fill those up, we fill them up quickly with those E12s and childcare. So want to also, commend them for their quick responses, and they are reacting quickly and giving us names and getting people registered, so we use up those doses that are in our county.
Yep, Jamie.
Jamie, I was on several legislative update calls and conversation town halls this week, and the higher ed educators question came up. And so I think the higher ed is saying, well, if you look at the age groups, the larger cases are within that kind of college demographic. And can you speak at all to adding these professors to that list?
Well, and Kathy and I will be meeting with one of those groups in our community, and that question is on our to talk about. But our message that we're receiving from Minnesota is that we are focusing on childcare and the E12 in order to support healthcare providers.
Yep.
Basically is a big part of that, to get the kids taken care of so healthcare providers can be at work. And so that's what we're being told is the reason for that priority right now.
Okay.
And that's all we've heard so far.
Good deal.
If I can add one more question. On the 1,000 vaccines that you received this last week, some of them you do through your site, you give through your site. Do some of them go to the Sanford Clinic too?
And we did actually have doses that we shared with them above and beyond the 1,000 that came through our site.
Okay, that would be helpful to maybe know that too for the future, so that we kind of get an understanding. So they're actually more than 1,000 then, but the 1,000 you talk about are what were administered by
On our site.
public health.
So we actually received 975 doses because we didn't have a hospital, so we received them through that healthcare coalition. And of those doses, we kept 500, and we shared the rest with our Sanford and Essentia partners to focus on their clients 65 and over.
And just to add to that, that was the first Pfizer type that we used because the clinic had the ultra cold. So they were able to store that for us. But now they've changed that distribution. So the Healthcare Coalition is no longer going to be in charge of distributing that. So we don't anticipate that we're going to get another batch like that. However, Jamie and I requested to be on the meetings with the hospitals in Minnesota. So there's 9 hospitals that are making some decisions, as well as MDH. So we've made a request as a local county that has no hospital that we want to be on that decision-making group as well. So we will be invited to be part of that group, so we can speak for Clay County.
So these 65 and older people in Clay County that might typically do their clinical work at Sanford and Moorhead, how does the Sanford Clinic in Moorhead get their vaccines to be able to distribute to their patients?
They will now get it through that hospital group. So the hospital group will distribute. In fact, just this last week, they received a shipment for the Sanford Clinic, but they needed to share that with other Sanford clinics in our region. So they got a shipment of 975, but that was to be shared among a number of clinics. So those hospital systems will determine that now.
Thank you.
I'll talk a little bit about the plan for distribution across Minnesota, but first of all, I want to say that we do have another 1,000 doses this week. 500 of those are first dose and 500 are second dose, so we'll be doing those 2 clinics. Again, our priority for those are still the Phase 1A and then childcare and the E12. So in Minnesota, the distribution plan, basically, the governor has kind of a multi-pronged approach to vaccine distribution in Minnesota to try to increase opportunities for vaccination. Minnesota did receive an additional 35,000 doses for this week. Typically, it's about 65,000, and it sounds like a lot, but it's not when you spread it out across the state. But Kathy talked about the healthcare, the hospital systems that MDH is working with, and so they will be shipping vaccine out to clinics and hospitals, and their target population will be the 65 and over the next few months. So that's their focus, so they're trying to get some doses into those local clinics, which we had already done here by sharing ours with our local healthcare partners in Clay County. Public health will continue to focus on Phase 1A, and the Commissioner of Health talks about, even though the child care providers and the E12 are not part of Phase 1A, that's what we are covering at the same time. So as doses open up, we also will vaccinate them. Child care providers in early childhood through 12th grade education staff will continue to be vaccinated by public health, but the state is also looking at running a community vaccination site in Minneapolis, and providers, healthcare providers, child care providers and daycare providers will be invited to that site as well. So down in Minneapolis is where they're looking at that as another opportunity. The 9 pilot sites that we had, one of which was in Fergus Falls, will be focusing on second doses this week, but they also continue to offer the random selection for the COVID community vaccination program in Minnesota. So anyone who was able to register but didn't get a vaccine is still registered, and they will do that random selection for them as well. Opening opportunities for community vaccination, a site in Minneapolis and one in Duluth. So those are the sites that would be an opportunity. So you can see how important it is that we have vaccine in Clay County to serve the residents. There's just not enough.
Yes.
For clarification, then, the pilot sites such as Fergus Falls will not be giving first doses. If you get your name drawn, you've got to either go to Minneapolis or Duluth.
Not to my understanding that this week it'll be those second doses. They'll still random select, but it'll be Minneapolis, Duluth locations.
Well, I
And they're
threw my-
calling those their community vaccination program sites. So they do hope to open more of those in the coming months, but right now those are the 2 that they have as a state priority. And they also are opening up or launching what they call a statewide vaccine locator map. So you can go to the map, click on your county, and it'll open up and show opportunities. In Clay County, because in public health, our clinic is closed, we're still doing by invite only. They do have the Sanford Essentia in Moorhead, and they have the Hawley site located. If you click on the map, they're there. But again, that is only as doses are available, and they are not asking people to call, but that they will reach out to their patients as vaccine becomes available.
Commissioner Gross, did you have a question?
What's the difference? Is there a difference between the first dose and the second dose?
Basically, that's what helps you to get from that 50% to that
Right, but it's the
95%.
same vaccine?
It is. You have to stick with the same. If you had Moderna, you need Moderna, and if it's Pfizer, you have Pfizer. We'll be receiving some doses, our second doses this week, that will be stored at Sanford in the ultra-cold, the Pfizer vaccine that we distributed last week.
You don't know from week to week how much you're gonna get, huh? Do you, or?
We do not. We do spend a lot of time completing surveys and questionnaires on almost, it feels like a daily basis, and getting information back to MDH, whatever their priority population is. We collect numbers, we shoot back to them that we can serve them, and then we get the vaccine that they distribute to us based on the limited doses.
Because I'm scheduled for my second one next week, and I was just wondering, We don't know, though, whether the vaccine will be
It
there.
depends on if the vaccine will be there, hopefully, because they are planning to send them more out to the clinics, but as Kathy mentioned, those are being distributed throughout the region, not just in Moorhead.
I have another question. The long-term care facilities were they were being handled by the pharmacies, correct?
Correct.
And as far as our long-term care facilities in Clay County, have they all been completed?
You know, I didn't look at the schedule to see who had actually been completed by now, but I sure hope so,
It was my understanding that they probably are. So,
based on the schedule.
yeah, and so based on that, are pharmacies receiving any more vaccines?
Not
to-
at this
to-
time. They did mention that there would be pilot pharmacies that would receive vaccine, but no details about
Okay, so
that.
at this point in time, their only responsibility was to long-term care facilities,
Assisted living
cognitive care.
facilities.
And so now that they've completed that, the likelihood of them having distributions to use isn't in the picture yet.
Not yet, but the plan is that they will be. The commissioner talks about that being an option for people in the community, like flu shots, just not knowing when that will be because of the
Right.
limited doses.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair and Commissioner Ebinger, you know, it's difficult for Clay County residents when you have two sites that are, one in Duluth and one in Minneapolis, not to mention the previous sites they set up, and even getting our people in Clay County over to Fergus Falls. It's a little bit of a hardship. So hence why we requested to be on the decision-making group, to hope to have a voice for Clay County, because, we feel like, without a hospital, the hospital is across the river and they're doing their North Dakota doses, but we don't get as much as some of the other counties that have hospitals, and so we have the capacity. So we really want to be on the group to kind of push for more in Clay County. So we plan to, be a voice there.
I really appreciate that. I'm 65 and older, and I threw my name in the hat for the drawing, and if I got to drive to Minneapolis, unless there's a blizzard, I can do it. But I would say probably 50% of the people in my age group can't. And that is very dismissive.
Right.
And I appreciate the efforts you're going to make sure that people in our region are represented.
Okay, and Mr. Chair, I have just had a question from Commissioner Cayley about masking, because we're hearing so much about some on the national news, the double masking. So I'm just going to report what CDC and MDH are stating as masks. So there's some do's and don'ts. So what they're saying is still the 2-layer washable, breathable fabric. So like the masks we have, it's double layer and it's just a cloth mask. So those are still appropriate and they cover your nose and mouth. They fit snugly around the face. They aren't at this point saying you need to double mask. They're saying these cloth masks, they're very affordable and appropriate. The masks that are hard to breathe through, there's some vinyl masks out there. They're not recommending that. They're also not recommending those masks with the little valves or vents. You might have seen those on some masks. Those actually allow particles to escape. So those are not recommended, and you'll see some of those around. And then the N95s and surgical masks that are true surgical masks, those are still really intended for healthcare workers. So the general population is still, this is the recommendation from CDC and MDH. In regards to gaiters, there's lots of information about the gaiter masks. Those are the ones that are on the neck and up the face. So if those have 2 layers, or you double fold them up, so they're a double layer, they're okay to wear. Face shields, really, the face shields are used in sometimes in the congregate care settings in schools, but not for the general population. So it's not recommended that you wear face shields around. And just, the trouble sometimes people have is if you wear glasses and the masks fog up. That's really tough. So if you have something that you can have the nose piece that you can pinch to try to eliminate the fogging up is the best you can do. Remember that don't put masks on children under 2 years of age. That's a big thing. So children under 2, not recommended to mask those children. So hopefully that clears up some of the information about masking, as nationally they're saying 2 masks, and CDC and MDH is still making these recommendations, so.
I have to say, after hearing it, when you talk about the little kids, so many times when I'm out now, I see these little 3 and 4 and 5-year-old kids, and they're just really troopers. They're wearing those little masks.
Right.
I think that's pretty neat. I had a
Right.
granddaughter who turned 4, and they had a little get-together for her, and there she was with her birthday. She had to have her mask on, took her mask off to blow out the candles on her cupcake. Yeah. But they're real troopers, and I think that's hats off to the parents, too.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just don't put masks on 2-year-olds and under.
Right.
Don't put masks on babies, don't put them on 2-year-olds.
Turn 4.
and under. Correct. Okay.
All right. Anything else? Any other questions? Thank you again. I still see that our Minnesota numbers overall versus what they've received and versus what has been distributed isn't where I think it should be. At 50% isn't good enough. But thank you for putting all the vaccine you get into the arms of people in Clay County.
And we haven't wasted a dose yet. My goal is to get through this pandemic and not have 1 dose wasted, so.
Very, very good. We continue to thank you for your excellent work. Okay. We'll move on to our next item, update on business relief program. Morning, Steve, again.
Morning again, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. And if it would be acceptable, if I could just kind of roll my update into the agenda edition, if that would be all right.
Certainly, I think that's an excellent idea.
All right.
We'll make these other people wait just a couple minutes.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, we continued to meet over this last week. If you recall, our business relief application process closed on the 24th, so a week ago, last Sunday. And we spent the remainder of last week processing through those applications and also looking at the distribution piece. If you recall, back on December 16th, Governor Walz signed a legislative package, which a portion of that was directed towards the counties. Through collaborative effort with our Coronavirus Relief Committee and city representatives here within Clay County, we came through with guidelines and application process that this board approved on the 12th of January. Again, we accepted those applications through the 24th. We had a 2-person team that went through each of those applications, 1 person from the city, from a city in Clay County, and a representative from the county. And they reviewed it against the guidelines that were established. And again, the focus of this business relief was for those businesses that were directly affected by Executive Order 20-99. Through the process, we did receive 112 applications. After the review of those applications, we had 78 businesses that were deemed successful in the process. And they were then broken down and placed into one of 7 categories. And it was based on the amount of revenue lost from November 1st of 2020 to December 31st of 2020. And we compared that versus the same time frame the year before. And so in breaking that down and what those categories looked like, we broke it down to businesses which lost revenues up to $3,500. And there were 6 businesses that fell into those categories, and each of those businesses received anywhere between $500 and $2,252. Essentially, the businesses in these categories were whole, became whole based on the revenue that they lost from year to year. The second category that we had was businesses that lost up to $10,000. There were 13 businesses that fell into this category. And each of these businesses would be eligible for $3,250. The third category is businesses that lost up to $15,000. And there were 7 of these businesses. We received, those businesses would receive $10,000. The fourth category would be businesses that lost revenue up to $25,000. There's 14 businesses in this category, and each of these businesses would receive $12,500. The next category is $50,000, up to $50,000. These businesses were right around, 10 businesses, and they would be eligible for up to $15,000. The sixth category is $100,000 loss of revenue. There were 11 of these businesses. These businesses will receive $28,000. And the last category is businesses that lost up to $500,000. And remarkably, there were 8 businesses that lost that amount of money in the 2 months. They would be eligible for up to $40,000. We also broke out another group of businesses as a part of this, and that category was for businesses that were new to Clay County. And so because of their status, they didn't have the tax documentation to be eligible for any other programs that the state has provided over the pandemic. And so we identified 9 different businesses that were new to Clay County, and so didn't have the adequate tax documents, and those businesses received between $2,500 up to $25,000 with a total distribution of $170,000. So when we look at our business relief plan, we have the total amount distributed between the 78 businesses would be $1,243,646.85. The state of Minnesota did set an established administrative fee for each county based on this business relief package, with the Clay County's amount being $31,091.17, for a total amount of business relief and administrative funds of $1,274,738.02. If the board were to determine and make an approval today, we would be reaching out to each of these individual businesses and notifying of the dollar amount that they would be receiving. There is additional paperwork that needs to be completed by each of those businesses, and we need to turn those in prior to making a check run, which we would hope to do here within the next week to 2 weeks. So with that, I would yield for any questions.
Maybe just a little bit follow-up to the part of why this request is being made today. It was kind of at the recommendation of Lori as well. There is a certain period of time that we have to notify them, and before the funds can be distributed, they have paperwork that they need to fill out and send back to us. And we want to make sure all of that is done in a timely fashion so we're not up against our deadline for distribution. There was an awful lot of work by our committee, and there was just really a lot of different things to consider, and this was pretty difficult, and we think we've got probably what we can come up with is probably the fairest. When you hear this, that we've had some of our businesses that, just from November, December, losing $250,000 or more, just in that short time frame. This has got to be helpful to them. We didn't make anybody whole, like you said, with the exception of those 6 that were in the smallest category. We just felt that it actually helped round out our dollars to do it, but it was an awful lot of work, and I think this is a good solution. Commissioner Mojo.
Thank you. I just want to point out the fact that the 78 businesses that were eligible reported their revenue loss, as Steve Larson said, based on the previous year. And the total with those 78 businesses of revenue lost was $3,263,345.20. the grant that we received was just a little more than 1,200,000. There was no way to replace all of the revenue lost with this program. But I really do feel that we tried to have amounts that would at least be equitable based on what the business size and revenue lost was. I also want our community to know that these are businesses that sponsor softball teams and all sorts of fundraisers within our community, and they're hanging on by a thread. A lot of these payments, well, I know they're all very much welcome, but it's not the end of, they're not out of it yet. They really have had to dig deep into their reserves to continue operating in Clay County, and it's our responsibility as Clay County citizens, if we like our businesses in Clay County, to make sure and patronize them. So I think it's a sad spot that we're in, but I am thankful that we've worked quickly to make sure that these payments can go out soon.
Just to get this, the discussion stage, I would like to make a motion that we approve these amounts.
Second.
Okay, now that's getting into the agenda addition item, but that's fine, we can do that. We have a motion by Commissioner Gross and a second by Commissioner Ebinger to distribute the $1,243,647. In terms of discussion, I would like to add that it was the intent of our committee and the work of Lori that the distribution, she wants to include what we've already approved, and that's the 50% of the FBL and those rural liquor license, 50% of that. So the actual amount of distribution will be more than the $1,243,000, but I think we already acted on paying the other. Am I correct?
We have, Mr. Chair, and next week I plan to bring before the board the breakdown of that, so we'll have a full dollar amount for this board.
And they will be in the bills.
Yeah, and okay, so we have a motion and a second to go ahead and pay that, and of course, that will be subject to them turning in their paperwork to the businesses, so it'll take.
Okay, that's what my next question is there a verification process? I mean, if I put in an application, I say I lost 500,000, whatever, is there a verification that they did lose, or do they have to supply something, or?
Part of the application process is essentially checking that they're signing an affidavit that they're being truthful in what they've shared. And so we've looked at that process through both of our business relief plans and also this plan. And so there's a W-9 form that they'll have to provide as part of this process once they receive notification. But they are signing off that they are being honest.
Okay. Do we know, are those subject to income tax or anything like that, or?
Well, what we've been told is that we're supposed to have them talk to their tax provider is the answer that the county's supposed to provide.
Okay, thank you.
Before we call for the question, Brian, is there, based on the motion and second today, do we have everything covered from that standpoint to?
Right, I think we've covered everything and gone through in detail, so I mean, I think we're ready to move forward. I don't think there's anything else left that we need to do.
Okay, and I guess, once again, this process, and I'll tell you what, we've got a gem in Lori with the work that she did in helping us put all of these things together and make it all add up and as fair as possible, so thank you to Lori, too, for her work. Okay, seeing if there are no other comments or questions, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion carried. One of the things that, just to follow up on this, one of the things that I'm usually a stickler on is I don't like to see agenda items, additions come on where we're spending money. This is a rarity, and quite frankly, it's it's not our money and we're under deadlines, and so this one kind of needed to have some specific action done sooner. And unfortunately, at the time that Colleen prepared the agenda last Thursday, we just did not have the necessary information, which we ended up getting Friday. So that's kind of, it's kind of a unique deal there, why we act on it today. Commissioner Ebringer.
I just want to point out, it's not just our staff, but the staffs from the other cities in the county, and you two, and the electeds from around the county that put the gas to this and made it work. And, I appreciate it for what it's doing for our community, so thank you.
All right, thank you, Steve. Next, we're going to have our annual department updates from law enforcement. We've got Sheriff Empting, and we've got Gabe Tweeten, and we got Julie, and you got all sorts of support. I see you got Steve back there, the brains of the operation.
Ooh, ouch. Good morning, Mr.
All
Chair,
right, good
Commissioners,
morning,
thanks for having
Sheriff.
us. I'll hit on, some of the highlights that we had here in 2020 for the Sheriff's Office. We did have a busy year, and I'll leave corrections and emergency management to Gabe, but over the course of 2020, there was a lot of things that obviously did occur with COVID-19 and some of the civil unrest that we did see. We kind of had everything on cruise control going into 2020 up until the end of March when COVID-19 hit, and we had to try and determine and figure out how to police during a pandemic. And I think through that, we did a very good job addressing some of the issues that we had to address. For example, our patrol division, we had to determine what we were going to do to keep our staff safe and also keep the community safe while we were out there dealing with them. We did have to make some adjustments. We suspended doing any animal calls. We will not transport any animals in our cars at this time, just due to the fact that we need to keep our cars clean. We're not saying that we're not taking the animals, but if somebody wants to have an animal impounded, we request that they meet us at FM Animal Hospital, at which time we will impound the animal then. We also had to do more calls over the phone, so if we were able to handle call over the phone, we would do that. Obviously, a lot of calls we weren't able to do that with, but the ones we did. We also did not respond to certain types of medical calls for service. If it was a call for service that sounded like it was a flu-like symptom or something on the lines of somebody may possibly have COVID, we would not respond to that call unless somebody was in some type of cardiac arrest type thing where our assistance was definitely needed. We did inform the FM ambulance and our rural rescue squads if they wanted us there just to go ahead and call, and we would continue. That's been working very well over the course of the year, and we have not had any type of pushback or any type of negative feedback on that either. Some of the other things we were doing in 2020 as things went on, we had a very busy time with our investigative division. In April, we had 3 homicides reported in Clay County within 21 days. I was just talking to our county attorney yesterday, and I don't think we've ever had that happen. One of them was in the city of Hawley. It was a brutal assault. That was the first one. Another one was in the city of Barnesville. That was a young child. We did take the lead on both of those investigations. The city of Moorhead then had a homicide that occurred to where we assisted their efforts, and our job was to search a landfill. And it was an undesirable task, but it was a very, very important role. And we collaborated with other law enforcement agencies as well as our landfill supervisor and the landfill employees and our county engineer. And we were successful in our mission, which was very good for the family of that victim. There was also 2 more reported homicides in Clay County in 2020, both within the city of Moorhead. Moorhead Police Department did take the lead on those as well. We further had 5 rather bad assaults within Clay County to where I believe they're all being charged out for attempted murder. We had a shooting at I-94 on Highway 336 where an individual was asked to exit a vehicle. He was irritated with that and he shot at the car as the individuals were leaving. We had another assault in the Baker area that sent somebody to the hospital for an extended period of time. We had an assault from ex-boyfriend to an ex-girlfriend up in the Felton area, where he had not only stabbed his ex-girlfriend, but also assaulted her grandmother. And we also had a shooting in the city of Dilworth that we worked with and assisted on. That was a lot for our investigative division, considering we have 5 investigators and 1 general investigator, but they all stepped up to the plate and handled everything very well. Our narcotics investigations, they were very busy this year. We had 23 lead county narcotics investigations, and 7 of those were adopted federally. We did take several pounds of illegal drugs off the streets of Clay County as well. Our street crimes unit continues to be busy. They are continuing to identify violent offenders in our area and tracking those offenders down and making sure that they are placed in custody. So we have a safe area here.
Sheriff, with the street crimes thing, do you want to just give a little background to that? I know Commissioner Ebinger's probably familiar with Commissioner Cayley's. That's a task force.
It's a task force, yeah. So our street crimes unit it's consisted of officers and deputies from Cass and Clay County, Moorhead Police, the Clay County, Moorhead Police, Fargo Police, West Fargo Police, as well as some U.S. Marshals are on the unit too. And our street crimes detective within Clay County, he is part of a U.S. Marshals task force where he is assigned to the Marshal's office, and he does have federal credentials as well, which makes some of the investigations easier for us because the federal government is able to do some investigative tactics that we are not. So it does help. It's very helpful for us here in Clay County to where we are able to get some of these bad people off our streets. So we have a safe community. Our narcotics investigators as well, they're part of the DEA task force, so they are task force officers assigned through the DEA. They are able to work local cases as well, but there's a lot of the cases they do will go federally. So,
Thank you for that.
yep. Yeah, our Lakes to River Task Force, yeah, we're currently still part of that task force. It is appearing that there's some issues at the state level. The state doesn't necessarily agree with the fact that our deputies are part of a federal task force, even though in our MOU it says to work collaboratively with federal agencies. And the MOU also states that you have to have 3 or more law enforcement agencies as part of that task force, which we do. But they feel that, when I say the state, I refer to the DPS. They feel that we are not in compliance with that because we don't have an officer or deputy from Wilkin or Breckenridge working on that task force as well. It's looking like that may dissolve come June 30th of 2021 here. But we do still have our collaborative efforts with the DEA, and we are still part of that task force.
Okay, Sheriff, Commissioner Gross, I think, did you have a question?
Yeah. If we would be lucky enough that this COVID-19 is going to decrease somewhat, and you said at the beginning of your report that you established some procedures that you don't do anymore, like I think the animal transfer. Is there some procedures that you're going to continue even if COVID-19 would go down, or are you finding some things that we did before that we probably can change? Or
with COVID-19, it really pushed the issue for us as far as the animal calls. That was one thing that I always kind of had a little bit of a concern about, because when you're transporting animals that sometimes have maybe mange and all different kinds of diseases in the back of your car, and then you're putting a human in the back of your car, I never really cared for that to begin with. So I don't think we'll necessarily start the transportation of animals again.
Okay.
But we will probably start looking at, responding to those medical calls for service and things like that, and doing more in-person calls if we're able to you know, such not doing them by the phone anymore and things like that.
Okay.
Yep. This is my department overview book here that we had, so there's a lot of information in here that I don't want to bore you with. Emergency management, Gabe's going to hit our records division. They were very busy throughout the year as well. We saw a significant increase in permit to purchases and permit to carries. In 2019, we issued out 141 permit to purchases, and in 2020, we issued out 217. And for the permit to carries, we issued out 410 in 2019, and in 2020, we issued out 950. So that's a significant amount, a significant increase for our staff to deal with. And we have a certain amount of time to get those processed and get those through, and they were able to do that just fine. They're rock stars over there. They essentially keep our building running, so we appreciate the work they do. We also transferred to a different type of crime reporting system. We went from UCR to the NIBRS system, which is our FBI reporting. That was not an easy process either, but we were able to work through that fairly easily. The records division also had to do some scheduling changes to accommodate judges, our county attorney's office, so we could have our in-custody reports done on time and right away in the morning, and they were more than happy to accommodate that. And of course, with the increase in our activity in the investigations division and patrol, they kept very busy with typing reports and transcribing statements and things like that. Our support services division, court security, they had a little bit of downtime throughout the year, but they also did have some tough times of trying to determine what they were going to do for court hearings and things like that, how they were going to maintain people are going to be socially distanced in the court hearings, how the juries were going to be able to maintain social distance and things like that. Sergeant Alderman and the court deputies worked through all of those challenges and were able to come through with that no problem. We also had some tunnel issues that we needed to get resolved, and we were able to do that as well. And I think probably this week those tunnel issues should be good to go, and we'll be back to dealing with that. Were you going to hit on that?
Nope.
Okay.
I need to now.
Yeah. Warrants and transports, they were a little bit slower this year than 2019, obviously, with everything changing with COVID and our court systems changing a little bit. They did transport a total of 512 people in 2020, which was down from 2019. 2019 was 796. They also transported some chemical dependency type transports and MIs. They transported 81 in 2020 compared to 84 in 2019. The amount of miles was significantly down. In 2020, they traveled 64,315 compared to 2019 where they traveled 93,080 miles. It's almost down a third, but still a lot of miles being put on by our transport folks. They also transported 71 people to our state pen as well. Our civil division, the numbers of papers were down as well just due to some executive orders from our governor. They served a total of 1,399 papers. Those would just be regular old papers like writs and things like that. That was down from 2019. They did some summons. That was 439. That was down from 2019. And they also served 314 subpoenas, and that was down as well from 2019. Patrol division, that ended up with 16,881 types of calls for service or self-initiated activity and things like that, which was up from 2019 with 15,933, and it was also up from 2018. And I do have just some graphs here if you'd like to take a look at those as well. For some reason, we're seeing an uptick in vehicle pursuits. Those were up to 55 compared to 32 from the year prior. Our staff are making good decisions as it pertains to that as well. We did deploy our stop sticks 20 times in 2020, and that was up as well because we deployed those 10 times in 2019. We are making good decisions as it pertains to stop stick deployments as well. It's that's a dangerous thing to do, to be able to deploy those because you don't know what that suspect driver is going to do. So our deputies are finding areas to deploy those safely. We had 67 DUI arrests also in 2020. We had 42 incidents where our canines were used with 1 apprehension, courtesy of Canine Deacon. Our SROs continue to be active in the schools with truancy issues, juvenile welfare, safety issues. They're also partnering with Clay County Social Services and others relating to the juvenile issues outside of school.
Mark, or Sheriff?
Yeah.
Quickly, how did our SROs change their method of working with folks when kids were virtual?
Some of our SROs, for example, our DGF schools, when they were virtual, we had to reassign. We had to reassign Deputy Lee, and he was working in our civil division, assisting in there. Ulen School, they continued on, and, well, at the onset of COVID, Ulen School did not continue. Therefore, we reassigned Deputy Reno to be an assistant emergency manager, which is her secondary assignment. So she became more of our intel person for COVID, where she was gathering all sorts of information early on and helping us make decisions as we moved forward with COVID.
Good. Part of the reason I asked is I really feel that the connection that our kids in those schools have with our SROs are important on everyday experiences, but the strains and stresses that kids are experiencing because of COVID and what the pandemic has done, I think only strengthens that need for that relationship with them. So I'm glad to hear that they're continuing to impart.
Yep, and now that the schools are back in session, our SROs are back in the schools and taking the proper precaution, just like all the students are doing as well.
Thank you.
We do have school resource deputies that are continuing to be active within their communities as well. Deputy Lee is also on the school board in Holly. Deputy Reno just got elected to the school board in DGF. Deputy Steffes continues to be on the Moorhead School Board, and we also have other deputies that are active within their communities through Lions clubs and things of that nature. We also were able to purchase a PPE for everybody to protect our staff as it pertains to any type of civil unrest, and we did implement our body-worn camera program for in 2020 as well. So it was a rather busy year for us at the sheriff's office, and the staff over there, they handled it like rock stars, to say the least. No matter what was thrown at them, no matter what kind of curveball was thrown at them, they were able to handle it no problem. And they are just a great group of people that we have working here in Clay County. We should be very happy to have them.
Who do we going to do next? We're going to Gabe, or are we going to Julie? What do you want? Julie, we're going to.
Julie?
All right,
Julie?
thank you. The correctional facility continues to operate under COVID precautions. In 2020, we did finally open up our second phase of our facility, which included our kitchen and laundry room. We are cooking on site for the first time in my career as a jail administrator. We have a contract with Trinity, and they do provide food services, not just to the jail, but to detox and detention. As I said, we were operating under COVID. We ran the jail for about 1 month under normal operations. We have yet to run that facility normally since it's been open due to the various things, being at a 2-phase build as well as COVID. So we're hoping in 2021, it'll be our year we can get back to normal jail operations. But in the meantime, we are still operating under full COVID precautions at the jail, which means that every intake that comes to our facility is quarantined. On day 10, we do a test on them. If they are positive, they go into isolation. And if they are negative, they get to go into general population. By having this type of layout, we have been able to prevent any outbreaks in our jail with COVID. But it does mean we have to utilize every single space within that jail. Every unit we have is being used either for regular housing or for quarantine or isolation. We are very, very fortunate that we have this new facility, that we got it when we did. This facility was designed to have negative airflow systems in various parts of the jail, so we actually provide medical isolation. I'm not sure what we would have done if we would have been in the old facility, honestly. So again, thank you for that. Timing couldn't have been any better for us here in Clay County. A couple things we got going on is we still have our River Project, which is our Lakeland Mental Health that comes into our facility. We have equivalent of 2 full-time employees that come in and deal with our inmates and work with our inmates. Not only do they provide programming for us, but they provide counseling for our inmates. And with COVID, there's been additional stress on our inmates, and having them on site has been, I can't express the need that we had for that and how thankful that we have that program. They've been a great partner for us. Not only do they help the inmates, but they help our staff too, because they can help de-escalate inmates for us and just reduce everybody's level of stress. In addition, they work with our RAP officer for re-entry into our community. So they work on housing, programming, and any kind of case management that they may need when they leave our facility, which will only reduce our recidivism in the long run. So it's a great program that we have here. And they have been able to operate through COVID. We've been able to make some adjustments, but they've never missed a day. So we really appreciate that project. Even with the reduced number of arrests due to COVID, the jail still did book in 2,069 inmates in 2020. Our average daily population was 82.6. As a reference, in 2019, our bookings were 3,447, and our average daily population was 116.5. I can tell you right now, our population is already increasing this year. We've been averaging in the 90s, so we are seeing some moving back into normal, but we will continue to do quarantine and follow our COVID precautions so that we can maintain a safe environment for not only our staff, but the inmates in our custody. In 2020, we had planned on trying to do some boarding contracts. We were looking at the Department of Corrections, maybe the U.S. Marshals. Unfortunately, that all got put on hold due to COVID. We could not take on contracts. But in 2021, we really want to relook at that, maybe later on in the summer, towards the fall, and see if we can generate some income, if we can get our numbers where we can take on boarders to help with our budget and those things. A couple things we have going on in 2021. We have 2 full-time corrections officers who are being deployed for 1 year. That will be somewhat of a issue for us for staff coverage, but we are working on some possible solutions for that. And lastly, I just want to touch on the Hearts of Clay. The Hearts of Clay is our jail ministry that we have in Clay County. They provided quite a bit of our programming in our jail. And then they would actually come in with volunteers and never cost the county anything, and spent hours and hours every day helping our inmates with programming needs, whatever they had, and providing mentoring. Unfortunately, with 2020, we had to stop all in-person programming in the jail just due to the safety of COVID. However, they have been able to find different ways to still assist us. The big one is mentoring, and they come in on a regular basis and meet with our inmates through our video kiosk system. We are very thankful for the Hearts of Clay. They've provided great services to us, and we are hoping again in 2021 to get them back in our doors and helping our community and our inmates within the facility. So.
Commissioner Gross?
Just as information, that Hearts of Clay is our former Clay Ministry program.
Yep, it's a former Clay Jail Ministry. Yeah. They changed their name. Yeah.
And you got Giving Hearts Day coming up, so if you need a place to give to, Hearts of Clay is a good.
Hearts of Clay is a great one, yeah.
Commissioner Mojo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Julie, I want to commend you and your staff for not having a major outbreak. There's been a lot of different facilities on the cover of papers. For whatever reason, that's happened, and I know it. A lot of hard work has gone into making sure that that doesn't happen, and hopefully it doesn't and continues that way. But I appreciate the effort. It's not a secret that I have a loved one serving a prison term in one of Minnesota's correctional facilities. And this loved one has a mental health illness. And so when we were planning for our correctional facility, I was very deliberate to make sure that Clay County had a partnership with a mental health facility in town to offer services to people. We were able to get that done. And my aunt sent me a letter a month ago that said, Clay County is the top of conversation of all the inmates for their amazing mental health services. And that says a lot because, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
People make mistakes, and mental health leads to that a lot of the time. And so the fact that Clay County is one of the renowned places in the state for offering services to people says a lot. And it's a challenge, it's a budget constraint, but it's something that I'll continue to support. because we have to continue to take care of our people, even if they make mistakes. So thank you.
Thank you. We do really appreciate our behavioral health unit. It was very important to all of us on the admin side when we were building this facility that was a priority for us. And I think you, Kevin, you were part of those conversations as well, and well, all of you were, and I do appreciate it. It's been a godsend, quite frankly.
Well, just to kind of echo what Commissioner Mojo said, when we go to, and unfortunately, we haven't been able to do it recently, but when we go to our AMC meetings and through the halls of these conventions, when it comes to the mental health programming in facilities, Clay County is in high regard amongst the entire state. And there was a lot of insight, as Commissioner Mojo said, and there's an awful lot of us that were strong supporters. You can't just lock them up and throw away the key and not try to make their lives better. It also improves the lives of family members. So it's, just echoing what Jenny has said, it's a good thing. Commissioner Ebinger.
And Julie, I was on the other end of the spectrum when we put all this together, and I just want to point out, and I'm sure the commission already knows it, there was great leadership that came from this body, and a lot of work in giving us the opportunity. But as a department director then, and I'm sure Bill Berquist would agree with it, we could provide a little leadership in getting the resources, but to actually make it work is people like you and your staff that make this work and continue to make it work. And in my career, I saw a lot of efforts in law enforcement towards mental health, but when the grant wore out or when the immediate crisis was dealt with, it tended to fade into the background and quit working. You've done a remarkable job, and your people have done a remarkable job of having a facility that meets the needs of the people that are placed in it, and not just houses them or warehouses them. And that's one of the things I'm really proud of from my time here in Moorhead, is that in the juvenile facility where we actually can make a difference in people's lives. And you do that every day, and I hope you know we're grateful.
Thank you, and my staff would thank you too.
I just want to go back to your comments in your report and your goals for 2021 and beyond in terms of maybe trying to get outside contracts. Just an example of that, when we were able to expand our regional juvenile center, it allowed us to have a lot more available spaces there. And again, the recognition from throughout the state at the work and efforts that we do in terms of helping these kids, as opposed to just putting them in a cell. Last year, we probably saw $1 million in additional revenue from non-members. And you know what else that does? It helps your budget, but it also allows us to even do more.
Right.
And so I like your goal. I hope you can achieve it until it comes to the point when we no longer have the room. But there's excellent opportunities there, and I think you can look to that regional juvenile center to see how that benefits everybody. Were you done?
I'm done.
Okay. Gabe.
I'm up. Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Mr. Chair. I just thought I'd start off with just a quick overview of emergency management for the two new commissioners that maybe aren't familiar with my role as much, and then I'll just go into a brief summary of our activities for 2020. So the state of Minnesota does require every county in the state to have an emergency management director. There's a certification process that the director has to go through. The state division which oversees emergency management in the state is the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, which falls under the Department of Public Safety. And they guide state emergency or county emergency managers and are our conduit to receiving state and federal disaster aid. My EM emergency management salary is partially paid for by a matching grant. It's an EMPG grant, which is offered through the Department of Public Safety. So that's a grant that we get annually. And then two of the emergency manager's major responsibilities that are required by the state and FEMA for the county to be eligible for disaster funding is making sure the county's multi-hazard mitigation plan and the county emergency operations plan are up to date and approved. During a time of disaster, some of my roles are to brief the county board, county administrator, and the sheriff on potential disaster or disaster situation, and if appropriate, recommend a disaster declaration to the county board. Then I would draft the disaster declaration, and once signed by the county board, I would file it with the state of Minnesota, so then there's a record of it for the state and FEMA. Let's see, I also work with, as an emergency management director, with our local, or our county fire, EMS, and law enforcement agencies, and help them with training and grant needs and opportunities that are available, and also with equipment needs. So a lot of more of our rural fire departments, rural EMS agencies, a lot of times I kind of keep my eyes open for grants and things of that nature and pass it along to them. I serve on the Radio Advisory Committee, the RAC, for the Northwest Regional Emergency Communications Board, which you two are now a part of. So I guess I'll be probably advising you on how that board should proceed with some of its the grant opportunities there and where we move with the state emergency communications network. And then I also manage the county's emergency notification system, which went from Code Red to Cascade Alerts this last year, and that's actually a regional system. In 2020, some of the things that emergency management had going on was we did finish our revision of the county's multi-hazard mitigation plan, and that was a collaborative effort with the University of Minnesota Duluth, Hunriser Consulting, Clay County GIS, Mark was a huge part in that, the City of Moorhead GIS, and then the City of Moorhead Emergency Manager. So that was, and then also townships and municipalities within the county partook in that update. That has been approved and ratified by FEMA. I supported public health with, and continue to support public health with COVID-19 efforts. I did coordinate getting vaccine information out to all the county's first responders that were a part of the Group 1A vaccine distribution. I've acquired PPE from state, federal, and other resources and distributed that to our county first responders, to include fire, EMS, and law enforcement throughout the county. We did line up a program that the sheriff's office was able to help, which was providing some deliveries early in COVID to our vulnerable populations out throughout Clay County that maybe weren't able to get into pharmacies, had some issues where their health conditions made them more susceptible, so they did not want to go to grocery stores and things of that nature. We did activate the EOC and planned for some civil unrest events early in the spring after the George Floyd events in Minneapolis that occurred in Fargo and Moorhead. We helped coordinate and facilitate with county, or I helped coordinate and facilitate a countywide fire exercise in which all but 2 fire departments in Clay County partook at the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Rail Yard in Dilworth. We're also, emergency management manages the drone program for the county, and that is in the process, just about complete now, is from transitioning from Valley Water Rescue to the Moorhead Fire Department. Worked with a group called VOAD, which is it stands for Volunteer Organizations Active During Disasters. I work extensively with them, so it'd be groups like American Red Cross, Salvation Army, and then some other smaller groups. And they help us, obviously, in times of disaster, help with getting aid out to our communities. They help with a lot of sheltering, planning, in the event of a disaster. So I do meet with them monthly and work pretty extensively with them. I also work with the other area, Fargo-Moorhead area emergency managers from across the river and on our side of the river with disaster planning, and then also Code Red, or our transition from Code Red to Cascade Alerts. And currently still working on our FEMA disaster reimbursement for COVID expenses. So that's still an ongoing process. So 2020 was a rather busy year, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask, or if you ever have any questions about emergency management, please let me know.
Commissioner Mojo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also want to thank you, Gabe, for your presence on our CARES Act Committee meeting. I know that took a lot of time out of what you were, other jobs and tasks that you had, but you were really instrumental in us planning for our vaccine rollout, which we're in the process of right now, but also helping make sure all of our businesses were connected with the CARES aid. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have one further thing, Commissioner, Mr. Chair. You know, we've talked about a lot of things that we've done here in 2020, but we wouldn't be able to do that without your support. It would be very difficult to complete our mission without the support of the commissioners. So I'd like to thank each and every one of you for your continued support to the Sheriff's Office and everything you do for us throughout the year. It is greatly appreciated. Our staff notices it too, and they know that you support them, so we do appreciate it.
No, thank you. It's, public safety is important for our county, so. All right, that concludes your report.
Thank you.
All right. While we're getting ready for Mark to come up, I did want to mention in the sheriff's statistics there, when he talked about the number of service calls, that's like 46 calls every day, in addition to everything else that you guys all do, so.
That also includes your self-initiated activities, so 46 would include your traffic stops and
Sure.
It is busy.
Thank you. All right, next we have our annual update from our Information Services, Mark Sloan.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners.
We're slightly behind.
Yes.
But that does not mean you should not take the time you need.
Okay. Normally, I've done a PowerPoint or some kind of presentation like that. This year, I went with a handout that you could take home and put on your fridge or whatever. The Information Services Department creates, maintains, and provides geographic information systems, websites, and online services to Clay County departments and other agencies and citizens. An emphasis is placed on proactively developing data and services to improve overall access to county information. The goal of the Information Services Department is to put the right information into the hands of our employees, partner organizations, and our residents. Department functions include management of geographic information, creation and maintenance of addresses, management of the digital parcel map, video recording of designated meetings, performing graphic arts functions, and delivering online services. The Information Services Department consists of 3 full-time staff, 2 variable hour employees. Both of our variable hour positions at present are vacant. We don't have people in them. We will add them as needed. Those are depending on what kind of projects we have. Some of the major things we've done in the last year and are doing right now is I want to mention is we manage the Clay County website, and it's almost 5,000 pages of information. A year or so ago, our average visits to our website was about 44,000 visits a month. When COVID hit in April, we went to 77,000 visits a month, and then we've been staying in that 77 to 80,000 visits a month since. So it's been showing us that the information on our website is really important to people. So we worked really hard to make sure it's as current and up to date and providing what they're looking for. Another thing we do is meeting support. Right now, one of our staff members is broadcasting this meeting. We broadcast it live on YouTube and on Facebook. We also put it on our Clay County webpage, and people can watch it later on cable TV channels across the county. Our COVID website, I put that on here as a bullet because the COVID part of the website gets updated constantly. So we've been working hard to make sure that that part of information is always up to date. It takes a lot of resources to keep that happening.
Mark, I have a question in regards to that. In terms of tracking the hits on the website, how has that changed during the pandemic in comparison to years prior?
We've more than doubled our traffic. It's been a huge impact on it. And we actually can see what people are looking for, so we always try to make sure that we're answering what their searches are for. Okay. We look at that and make sure that we're doing what we can.
Thank you.
One thing we did this last year was we did something called migrated our parcel fabric, which really doesn't mean anything to people outside that field, but the parcel fabric is the software that we use to maintain the tax parcel data in its mapping form. We moved it from the old platform it had been on for a decade into a new one, and that was completed in December, which will hopefully allow us to provide a better quality product. We also changed how we interact with Moorhead's data, and that I think will be a much better fit for, it'll be much smoother, less prone to things breaking and not working correctly. We create addresses. We're the addressing authority for all of Clay County, and in turn, we feed those to our emergencies. The Red River Regional Dispatch Center gets that from us, so they know where to respond. Gabe mentioned the Emergency Operations Center. Clay County GIS, we actually have a desk in the Emergency Operations Center, so when they activate it, like he says, we get a call, whatever time of day or night that is, and we arrive, and then we staff our desk, and we will provide them with whatever thing that is, because when there's an emergency, the first thing they want is a map, and our job is to get that map as fast as we can with what they need it to be showing. One thing I want to mention is over the last, we do addressing, and part of that is the rural street intersection signs, the big green signs at all the intersections out in the county, as well as the blue house number signs that you'll see at the end of driveways out in the county. We've first installed all of those back in the early 2000s, 1999, 2000, 2001. Over the last few years, our Highway Department sign division has replaced the green intersection signs because signs wear out over time. And this year, they'll start replacing the blue house number signs. There's a lot of them, and they're going to start maybe a township or two a year, depending on what they can work in. But we'll try to keep those so that they're visible so that our emergency responders can find them. So we're working with Highway on getting that to happen. We'll have some new GIS online tools coming out this year for both our planning office and our assessors. Those will be awesome once they come to life. We're working with our facilities manager, and those folks were spooling up something called a FMS, which is a close relative to GIS. It's like an online mapping system, only we're going to do it for our facilities, like this building and all of our county-owned buildings. And in that, we've got all the rooms and doors and air handling systems and everything in it. And we've been working on that the last year or so, and hopefully this year we'll come up with an online tool so that our maintenance guys can actually pull out their smartphone and say, yes, I changed that air filter, and it feeds that information back. So it's a way they can actually keep track of what they're doing. And it's I think it's going to be pretty nice for them, and it's something that we had the capability to provide, so we're trying to make that happen. Next section I wanted to mention is our little department is probably the most agile department we have, in that we are constantly working on different things. We respond to whatever the needs are of our organization. One of the big things we've done in the last year is a lot of graphic arts and signage. All the signage you see around all of our buildings is done by our staff. And there was a time frame in early COVID where it was changing constantly. But even like that sign right there on the wall behind you, that was something that came out of our folks. So their ability to adapt and provide whatever may be needed is really, I think, really impressive. Another project we worked on this last year is this room. It took a lot more time than it sounds. The other one, I had to put it on here just because it came up earlier today, is I put on a bullet called grant administration. That's all of us in my department, from creating the online forms to reviewing the applications to all those steps in there, has taken a tremendous amount of resources, and we've been able to do that, and I'm thankful for the help. Our department also relocated to the government center at the end of December. We're the only department over there, and since my staff have actually been working from home since March, it's just me. I'm the only one over there at the moment. Me and, well, now it's a few construction guys. It's a beautiful building, and it's working nicely. All of our stuff is there, and over time we'll move, once our staff comes back, we'll be operating out of that facility. One project I wanted to mention that we manage is our remonumentation project, which is we will have a contracted county surveyor that is remonumenting our section corners across the county. We have a very detailed process we're using on filling in some gaps in that, and we contract with them, and they've been doing a tremendous amount of good work for us. We just finished up Park and Tansom townships this year. some of the hardest corners in the county to locate. They actually had to wait for some of them for freezing. They did them in November because they're in the middle of swamps. And it's the only way they can get there is when the ground is frozen. But by tidying up those corners out there, they have probably not been resurveyed since the 1800s. If anything, if our citizens have anything they need to have survey work done, it will save them a lot of time and money because the corners are now there and we've reestablished them. And we'll continue working with our surveyor to cover more of those parts of the eastern. We're working up the eastern side of the county right now. And then lastly, I would like to thank my staff. They are amazing folks, and we are blessed to have such talented people that basically have the same issue I have, which is we can't ever say no. So we always say, yes, we'll get that done, and we always do, and I'm thankful to them for doing that. Are there any questions?
Commissioner Moschel.
Not a comment, but I also want to extend my gratitude to you for the work that you did for the CARES Act Committee. I think, did we have a close on a Sunday night at midnight? So the majority of the applications would have come in, and then we were going to meet as a committee on Monday or something to kind of work through that. And those applications had already been reviewed by the time we got to it. So that means that there are a lot of after hours reviewing and questions, and Commissioner Campbell and I really appreciate your help on that, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Just one question. Are you gonna have that room ready over there? I mean, that building ready?
Yeah.
Since you're the only one over there?
Yeah, you bet. Come on over. I have plenty of chairs.
Okay, very good.
Thank you, Mark. All right, we have a 3-year appointment to our Board of Adjustment. Matt.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Yeah, there's an opening that came up on the Board of Adjustment. Greg Anderson had served on the Board of Adjustment and the Planning Commission for a number of years, and so he is termed out. Just want to thank him for his service and all the good work that he has done. We had 3 very, very good candidates for this opening, and it was a really tough position. There's a lot of tough decision. There's a lot of discussion about it. And the board unanimously went with recommending Tim Brendamule to the Board of Adjustment. Tim has served on the Planning Commission for 9 years. He termed out, I want to say in November. And then he's also served on Oakport Township Board since 2007, I think. And he's a lifelong Clay County resident. Any questions for me at all?
Commissioner Moschel.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Last week, we talked about one of our other committees and making sure that the appointments to that committee represent a broad scope of geographic area of Clay County. And I think adding not only a producer, but a resident from rural Clay County, I think it was important to add that. So having Oakport, someone from Oakport Township really kind of helps balance that out. Tim is also a very committed board member, and I've seen him work on the Planning Commission and had meetings with the township as well. So he would be a good appointment. Make that motion.
We have a motion to appoint.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Moschel, second by Commissioner Gross. Any further discussion? Tim will be excellent. I've known him for a long time. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, the same sign. Motion carried. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Darren, good morning. Pay equity report.
I also come bearing gifts. Fortunately, they're not my gifts to give. They're actually from Rhonda Porter, and they are in recognition of mental health matters, and mental health awareness, which is actually what she informed me was in May, but she has a mask for all the commissioners and everybody. I think they're handing them out now because of the hope that in May we won't need them anymore, but I'm not sure that's going to be the case at this point. So those are courtesy of the Social Services Department and Rhonda Porter. And also, I'd like to congratulate Steve on his 25 years. I've worked with him for 10 years now, and he's been a great boss to work for. Unlike Commissioner Cayley, I have seen him without a smile on his face, but
Well, I was going to say, so have I.
yeah, but that is mostly the exception to the rule. So,
All right.
congratulations.
Good
All right,
boss.
pay equity. One of my least favorite reports to do out of all the reporting that I do. It is a Minnesota state statute that we have to provide every 3 years a pay equity report. And what's difficult about this is, number one, how they come up with all the calculations and algorithms and everything. And to tell you the truth, I couldn't even explain it if I had to. But what I do is I run all of the numbers, all of the point systems for all the positions, and then I feed that into a website that the state has, and then it kicks back whether we're in compliance or not. And what it's looking for is the male-female wage equity within that. The thing that makes this report difficult is it's every 3 years, so I have to go back and remember everything that we've done for 3 years on whether we changed a position points, if we changed the position name, if we've changed the organizational structure of something, and all of that has to be tracked. So I'm glad it's only 3 years, but it does make it a little bit more difficult. We did use the same grid system, and we do use the same scoring system as we have back when we had our first market study back in 2009, I think it was, 9 and 10. And then also, as you know, we had the 2019 market study, which also implemented a lot of these changes to the report. To make this as easy as possible, this is a public report. It has to be posted for 90 days. And the thing that you're looking for to make this as easy as possible to show you that we are in compliance is if you look at your statistical analysis test about halfway down, it says underpayment ratio 98.44789%. As long as the county is above 80% for the statistical analysis test, then we are in compliance. So as you can see, we're well within the compliance. The other nice report to look at is that projected pay report. It's kind of that graph. I don't know if I think you have that. It shows a predicted pay, and we're well in line with all of that as well. So it does take board approval and the board chair to sign off on this report, and then I will send that to the state today. So for any questions.
Any questions on the report?
I'll make a motion to approve the pay equity report.
I'll second the motion with a.
Motion by Commissioner Gross, second by Commissioner Mojo. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, if I may. Darren, my question is more of a clarification just for people that may be looking at this. The general job class information has the female classes and then the male classes with the average max monthly pay per employee. You know, it appears just by looking at that there is a difference, and I think it probably, if you could just comment on what that stat is.
Yeah, what they do is they take all the job classes that we have, and I think we have 128 job classes. And then within those job classes, they are all assigned a pointing system, and that's what we've used for our market study. And from that market study, we get those points for those job classes, and then what they do is I have to say how many females are in each of those job classes and how many males are in each of those job classes. And then if there is an equal number both, then that's another category. So if you have, for instance, the highway department, mostly all male, or the deputies, sheriff's department, mostly males. Public health, social services, mostly females. And so once you feed all of this information in, that's what kicks out these numbers. And as you can see, when I always have to kind of look at this again and say, okay, the percent below predicted pay is really probably what you're looking at. And those two numbers, 58.4% or 58.54% and 59.4% are very statistically close. And so that's why, if our underpayment ratio is less than 80%, then we would probably really have to look at how these all flow out. But right now, with the 98%, it's saying that not every position is going to be exactly the same, but of a statistical average, that we are within the compliance, that we are paying our females roughly the exact same as the males. And you know, it's not hard to do because we have a grid system, you know? And so if we were hiring all the females at grade 1 and we were hiring all the males at grade 5, then, you know, there's a problem there, but we don't do that, and we even have policies to prevent that as well. So that's.
So some of the difference, even though you might have a certain number of males and females within a class, some of the difference can be because of longevity.
Right, exactly.
Right?
You
Because
know,
we have in our system, we have a step process.
correct.
That it's equal opportunity for whether you're male or female, but it's just, in some instances, you might have a male who's just been here longer than a female in the same class.
Right, and when we put in the report, they don't ask for everybody's individual wage. They ask for what the minimum and the maximum are for that job class. So I use the example that deputies are at grade 18, which is mostly male-dominated, and social workers are also at grade 18. So they're going to have the same points. And what this report is looking for is if they're on the same grade and they have the same points, are they getting paid the same? And in our case, they are, because they're all on grade 18. Not everybody's individually getting paid the same. We may have people that are at the top of the scale and some at the bottom, or maybe our social workers are a younger group than our deputies, but it doesn't take into effect all of that stuff.
So it has to do with, a lot of it has to do with longevity.
Some of it, yeah.
And then my final comment is maybe just for the newer commissioners. We did a wage study a couple of years ago, and we looked at the wages of all, make sure that we looked at each job classification. It had nothing to do with gender. And so
Right.
there were adjustments that were made, but it was made to the position as a whole. And so I appreciate the fact that you provide this, but I'm thankful for the fact that it's equal.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion carried. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next we have a request to waive penalties, and we got Michelle is here this morning. Good morning, Michelle. And your first one is Blair property? Oh, excuse me, the Overland property.
Yep. Was she calling in, Vicki? Was her Colleen, Vicki, was she calling in? Okay, yeah. So she, her dad passed away, and because of COVID, it took her a while to get her background to become the guardian, so she's requesting to have the penalty waived because of her father.
And we do have, as part of our part of our packet, the letter that was submitted, so. Do we have somebody on the phone for this, Steve? Is it?
Say, Ann, are you on the phone right now? Ann must, I noticed there was two people on earlier. She may had to have.
Okay, yeah, and we have been running behind.
I'll make a motion to approve the.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the request on the Overland property to waive tax.
Second.
Waive the penalty.
Waive the penalty, yes. We have a motion by Commissioner Gross, second by Commissioner Ebinger. Any further discussion?
Just of note that the document that we received really does fall within the parameters of the situation, the medical hardship.
Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, the same. Motion carried, and we'll move on to the Blair property. And we also got some documentation on that one as well.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Tanya Blair Riebling. I'm on the team meeting, but my audio isn't working. I can see you guys. So if you have any questions regarding the documents or my brother's situation, I can answer them. It's my brother, Craig Blair.
Okay, thank you for your letter. It was quite thorough in your explanation of things, and it certainly falls within our parameters for being able to waive penalties, and
I think Kirk is here too on it, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Kirk was going to be in the room and I was going to be on the phone in case you had any questions, because it's kind of an involved situation that is still playing out. So, as far as his medical situation.
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to waive the late penalties on these properties.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Mojo, second by Commissioner Kaylee. Any further discussion?
Sorry for the situation.
Yeah, seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. Okay, and Michelle, you will work on,
I'll let them know. One of them did pay already, so I'll have to just refund that.
okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Yep, thank you. All right, so we'll move now to the request to approve the resolution 2021-13 to adopt and implement the Wild Rice Marsh River project, and we've got Kevin Kassenberg on the line with us. Good morning, Kevin. Almost
Good morning,
afternoon,
Commissioners.
the way things
Good to
are
be
going.
here. First off, I'd like to congratulate Steve on 25 years of service, too. That's a feather in your hat, Steve, so good going. The Wild Rice Watershed Marsh River One Watershed One Plan, we've been working on that for the last couple of years. The process is to work with entities that cover the watershed itself. So that's dealing with Clay County board members, both Frank and Jenny have been part of that. SWCDs in each county as well. So you got Becker County, Norman County, Monoman, Clearwater, Polk County, and the Wild Rice Watershed District. And like I say, it's been writing a comprehensive plan to cover the whole watershed. So working with landowners, taking inputs in farmers and landowners in those respective counties is a plan we've been working on for at least a couple of years here. The plan that we had drawn up was approved by the Board of Water and Soil Resources on December 17th of 2020. So at this stage of the game, we're looking at the implementation process, and that's what we're working on presently. The next step in the process is for each entity that's involved, that's the county board, SWCDs, and the Wild Rice Watershed District, to basically adopt and agree to implement the plan. And my board, the Clay SWCD, approved this at their January 14th meeting, so I guess to make it short and sweet, that's kind of where we're at, folks.
All right, any questions of Kevin?
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2021-13.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Mozo, second by Commissioner Gross. Any further discussion?
Yeah, Kevin, do we have, I know you and I discussed something about the Buffalo one too. Colleen, did you receive anything from the Buffalo?
Yeah, there's a memorandum of agreement that is coming for the board to sign, and my board will be voting on that at our February meeting. That's something I think you should have gotten a copy of that, Frank. That should have been sent out by Christine from the Wild Rice or the Buffalo Red River Watershed District. I believe you guys have a meeting tomorrow to look over the exact same thing with the Wild Rice Watershed District. So the the Buffalo Red and the Wild Rice one are almost working, coinciding with each other. They're caught up really at the same time. So, like I said, the Buffalo Red one is a little bit ahead. So that was something that you and I sat in on a meeting last week, Frank. That should have been sent to you. Hopefully, you got a copy of it. But the Wild Rice one is meeting tomorrow to discuss the same process, the memorandum of agreement.
I know we're discussing two different things. We're talking about the Wild Rice right now, but I do have the Buffalo one here, and I don't know if we want to move on that or whether we can't.
That's not on our agenda today to do that.
No, so we can put that on next week's agenda, I guess.
Okay, so we have a motion on resolution 2021-13. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. That is done.
Thank you, guys.
Yep, thanks, Kevin. All right, so Dave, we have a couple of things from Highway today. Sponsoring resolution is your first item.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
We have been getting a lot of interest in the local road improvement grants from small cities, from townships. Sounds like it's going to be a pretty competitive process, and I think it's going to be a fairly good challenge on the part of the committee that does approve these to find which project they're going to support. But we have always taken the stance that we will support and sponsor any Clay County small city or township that's interested in putting in an application. We did a few last week, and this one's from the city of Glendon, and it's for some improvements they'd like to do a little over a quarter mile on 12th Street. So it's on the south side of Glendon, starts at Park Avenue, which is a road that we just reconstructed last year and just finishing up a little bit this year, and it goes to the east about 1,600 feet. So it's on the south side of a development. It does have issues in there. I know in the springtime there's a lot of, the soils are real soft in there, and I think there might be springs underneath the road. But so it is a very worthy project, and it'd be nice to get that one rebuilt and paved. They don't have gravel in front of their place, and it gets dusty, and I know they put chloride down there, but it just gets so soft in this area. I think it'd be a good project, and I guess I feel we should sponsor it with the typical resolutions we have in the past.
Yeah, I think there's around 10 residents living on there, something like that, and I think it'd be a really good thing for Glendon there, so I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Gross, second by Commissioner Mozo to, for resolution 2021-14 for local road improvement grant. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion carried. Okay, your next is approval of to purchase stop signs and yield signs.
Yeah, our sign department, 2 years ago, finished our 911 sign replacement for the entire county. That ended up being a 3-year project. And then after they took 3 years to put those up, we realized that we were getting a little behind on just sign maintenance. So for 2020, they did straightening of all the signs in the entire county. They went down in each road and posts that they could straighten, they straightened them. The ones they couldn't, they replaced. So we did 1 full year of that, and now we're getting back on. We took a look at all the signs that are coming out of warranty, and I know Justin has been working with the sign department, and maybe he'll give just a little update on the work that they're looking at doing this summer.
Yeah, so we have a program called Simple Signs, and it just kind of...
Turn your microphone on.
We have a program called Simple Signs that identifies when the sign was replaced. And I would say in '06 is when we kind of went through and started replacing every sign in the county. And we started with stop signs and yield signs, and that was by far the most signs that we needed to replace that are out of warranty. So with the replacement of 500 stop signs and 200 yield signs, I think it would cover a little over a quarter of the county. And next year we would do the same thing.
Are we replacing these signs whether they need it, whether they need it or not, or just?
So I think there's like a 13-year warranty on the sign from the manufacturer, and we're 2 to 3 years outside of that warranty. So correct, we are replacing all the signs that are, and I talked to our sign department about that rather than just doing a blanket replacement on these things, but so they'll take a good look at them as well. We also discussed, either using a reflectometer, which is a little gadget that you can point at it and see what the reflectivity is remaining on the sign. And the other option is to do a night survey. It kind of does the same thing. So as the sign gets wore out at night is when you really notice that it's not as bright as it should be.
Okay.
I'm assuming you have this in your budget?
Correct. Yep, absolutely. I think we have a $40,000 traffic.
I think, just looking forward, I think it's great to be able to come and give these updates of what you're doing. Quite frankly, I think because you have this budget, I don't think budgeted, and then we approved your budget, I don't know that it's necessary for you to come to us to, for the approval. I think it's already been done through the budget process. But, for the new commissioners, certainly, I think it's good for you to do that. But I don't know that we need to have an approval on this, Steve. I think it's a situation that's already been done through the budget process, so. Yes, Commissioner Kelly.
Just a question. The warranties on these signs, what all does that cover?
So if the sign doesn't hold up, it's the amount of reflectivity that it has that they guarantee. If it doesn't hold up, then you can replace it and turn it in for a new sign. So you would, like I said, the way the makeup is of the internal part of the little sign materials, it reflects a certain amount of light back. And if that sign gets damaged or wears out or doesn't, essentially what they do is they basically get black like at night. When you put a light to it, it's just almost like it stays black. It doesn't reflect the light back to you. So I guess if it for some reason doesn't, I don't know if I've ever had a sign that was out of warranty, that didn't hold up. So it's pretty rare that it does. And I've not argued, but I've always pushed the point with our sign staff that just because it's got a 13-year warranty doesn't mean we just tear it down in 13 years. So we got to make sure that we're fiscally responsible, that we're taking a look at it. But there again, we don't want signs out there at night that are black either. We want the people on the roadway to have their stop signs and yield signs and things that actually work right.
It wouldn't cover if a truck drives over a sign and smashes it all up, or somebody is doing some target practice.
Yeah, any type of damage. One of the common things is, things run into it, people shoot them. Paintball is another one. As soon as that paintball hits it, you can see, during the daytime, you can't even see it at all, but at night, you can see that splotch, and you can see where the paint runs down. It's crazy how it damages, and it's almost like maybe if you had a piece of tin foil, how it's nice and shiny, and as soon as you start pushing on it, that tin foil gets all, that's what happens, and you can't see that during the daytime, but at night, you can really see when it damages it like that.
Is there any use for those old signs? I don't suppose there is. Other than recycle?
We used to hydro strip them. We'd send them down to Fergus Falls, and then they'd put them in a tank, and the acid would eat off the stuff, and they'd reuse it. So we do a fair amount of recycling with the certain blanks that we can do that. So we do recycle them and run them back through M&R and Fergus Falls. And then if they're not something that you could recycle that way, then we do bring them to the used metal place.
Thank you for the update. I don't see a need for a motion to approve this. It's already been taken care of, so, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move into our committee reports. We'll start with Commissioner Ebinger this morning.
Last Wednesday had two different meetings with the Diversion Authority. The first was Public Outreach Committee. The new Communication Director, Jennifer Darling, covered the authority's communication approach, 3 stages. We're ending the first stage of funding, which has been considered a success. The next stage will be construction, and then following the construction of the diversion, we'll have operation and maintenance. Again, this is also described as success, build and deliver. They have goals of developing information documents, enhance the branding of the Diversion Authority, and give legislative updates. Later that day, the authority's Finance Committee met. Executive Director Paulson reported The authority came in under its budget for 2020. They've acquired 496 parcels of land voluntarily and 93 through eminent domain. There was a discussion of the Oracle Cloud platform that's going to be used to coordinate the entire operation through the construction of the diversion. There was an increase to the budget that was reflective of the increase in the size of the project. John Shockley, the counsel for the Diversion Authority, reported on the WIFIA appropriation. It will not be closed until after the PP3 contract is finalized, so we know exactly the amount involved. That was covered in the board meeting the next day too, but it's a win. It's good news. It's extremely low-interest loan that's going to carry it for 40 years. And again, Thursday, the next day, we had the Diversion Authority Board. It was chaired by Vice Chair Chad Peterson of Cass County because Mayor Judd, Jonathan Judd, is exiting his position as chair and Mayor Moorhead to assume a district judge post. Again, Joel Paulson had his report. He has testified in the North Dakota legislature, and the diversion is included in the bonding bill to the tune of $850 million. RFP was released on the 15th for the joint venture, the P3. The WIFIA loan was discussed again. And the Corps had its work plan released, $115 million worth of work on this project. And again, John Shockley covered the WIFIA loan. Friday, I participated in the intergovernmental retreat, which I think everybody was part of here. And then over the weekend, I completed my state training for the Board of Appeal and Equalization. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Cayley.
On Wednesday, the 27th, I was able to attend the drug court graduation that we talked about last week, and that was just a really special ceremony. There were good articles in both the Forum and the FM Extra. I would encourage citizens to read those and find out more about this amazing program that we have in our area. The graduate was a mom, and she kind of shared her story about how she got involved in drugs and how, with the help of this program and all of the work she put in, emphasis on it was a lot of work, she's been able to turn her life around and put her family back together. And like Kevin said last week, it's worth every nickel that we invest in that program. On Thursday, the 28th, I attended a planning committee meeting from the Early Childhood Initiative, and we were talking about Week of the Young Child, which is coming up in May, and how to re-envision our traditional community events that we have for that. Friday, the 29th, was an intergovernmental retreat, and yes, we all attended that. I really appreciated in particular the presentation from the Department of Health on the timeline of COVID, how these vaccines are working. It was a very thorough presentation. And then Sunday, the 31st, I did also attend the virtual town hall with Representative Keeler, Marquardt, and Senator Eakin. That was just a public town hall. But citizens should know that they do have access to our representatives and our senator, and they are planning to hold those virtual town halls monthly. So they can go to Representative Heather Keeler's Facebook page, and she will be sharing information on those as they come up. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Gross.
Yeah, Tuesday, we had the Personnel Issues Committee met on the main thing we talked about was the University of Minnesota Extension is requesting to fill a half-time 4-H position to full-time to, instead of having 1.5, they'd have two positions. We're still looking at that. I I think we're gonna further meeting on that today probably and discuss that some more, but nothing got approved on that one. Tuesday night, I had planning, attended the planning commission meeting. There, 2 items were discussed. One was for a person that is plotting a piece of land into 5 plots, and that was approved. And the next thing was for some land just north of Dilworth that they want to do some industrial, put some industrial work in, place in there. And that was tabled now. That thing's been going on for several months now, and we tabled it again. And I think Matt is holding a meeting with Moorhead and Dilworth concerning that thing. Wednesday had the One Watershed, One Plan meeting. We approved that action today, so that took care of that. Wednesday afternoon, I don't know if anybody got the opportunity to watch the presentation of Dr. Zimmerman getting his engineer the state award. It was a very good presentation, a very good movie. I don't know if you saw the movie on it or not, but it was really a good movie concerning Dr. Zimmerman, and what was really good was his response to it, very humbling response, and it was just a good presentation. The afternoon, Wednesday afternoon, I also attended the drug court, that they had that graduation, and Jen has already covered that. And then, yes, the Friday, we had the governmental retreat, which I attended, well, I guess which we all attended, and you know what that was all about, so, okay.
Commissioner Module.
Thank you. Last week, I also attended the Planning Commission meeting that, that preliminary plat will be a referral to the Clay County Board to act on. So it was just a referral, correct? Okay. And then they talked a little bit about the comp plan updates coming forward. Wednesday, I attended the Prairie Lakes recycling meeting with Commissioner Campbell. They had election of officers. Thank you to Commissioner Campbell for his leadership as chairman for the past year. Had a plant manager's report and talked a little bit about our MCIT property insurance update. Those are continuing discussions after Commissioner Wayland and Campbell have really kept us up to speed on that. That will have to be something we'll go look at going forward. And then that day I also had the Diversion Authority Land Management Committee meeting. We talked a lot about the policy on disposal of land, the excess land that they've acquired. And I've been quite critical of making sure that we have something that really makes sense for rural properties. Talked a lot about how if we acquired a parcel of land from somebody and we determine that the Diversion Authority doesn't need that, making sure we go back to that property owner first to see if they'd like to repurchase. If not, move forward with adjacent landowners. And I think that really will keep the integrity of our rural ag communities intact if that's something that we move forward with. So good updates there. And then I did ask that board's changed a lot in terms of membership too. So I asked that they would distribute the new membership list out, which I see that they have done. Thursday morning, I attended the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. That was my first board meeting for that. Had a good update from Matt Evans on the landfill cell and the citizen drop-off, update on that. And then resource recovery campus update from Kirk Rosenberger. Talked a little bit about the PCA grant app and our timeline that we've also talked about. That day I also attended the MCC JPA meeting, as that was a first meeting for me. So we talked about the property acquisition status report. There was a Red River control structure appraisal update, and then talked about a handful of properties that we were to approve the appraisals, correct? That evening, I also attended the Lakes and Prairies Community Action Board meeting. Had two new member elections, a council member from Moorhead, Shelley Carlson, and our new House of Representative member Heather Keeler were elected to the board. We had a long discussion about the board assessment and the results of that, and then did our annual updates or annual action items like IRS rate reimbursement, board elections, et cetera. Friday, sorry, it was a long week. Friday, I attended the intergovernmental retreat. I want to give my thanks to the members of the Joint Powers for planning and facilitating that. I know that it was a tricky year because of COVID, and I really did think that it went quite smoothly, and we've all been in committee, virtual committee meetings for upwards of 4 or 5 hours, and it can get quite long, but I really felt that the conversation was vibrant and lots of people asked questions. I appreciate that our legislative representatives were part of that, so we could have a dialogue with them as well. After that, we had the CARES Act committee meeting where we reviewed the 78 applications for the CARES Act grant distribution. Thank you very much for acting on that today so we can get the checks out swiftly. Sunday, I also attended the public town hall with Senator Eakin, Representative Marquardt, and Representative Keeler. Felt that it was a vibrant conversation with constituents. I appreciate that. Yesterday, I attended the Clay County Comprehensive Transportation Plan, our first meeting in that study review. Went very well. MetroCog has a lot of work ahead of them, but has really laid a framework that I appreciate. I did make sure that I stressed the importance of maintaining our rural structure while also dealing with our metro structure in the county, so I appreciate that they will continue to look at that. And then yesterday, I also had a meeting with Bob from the State Auditor's Office. They're required to have a discussion with a board member in regards to fraud and transparency, and continued to echo that I appreciate our staff. They're always quite open to sharing any financial documents and answering any questions that I've ever had. So that concludes my reports.
Thank you. My report on Tuesday, we did have the PIC meeting, which Commissioner Gross already talked about, was dealt with some requests for extension, and there's more review to that. That's going to be, we're meeting again today on that. On Wednesday, the Prairie Lakes meeting, Commissioner Mojo's also talked about. That continues to go well. There's going to be one burner that's going to probably be shut down for a good portion of the month of March for some major repairs that have been approved through the bond that we did for that facility. As she mentioned, we had an election of officers, and on that board, the chair is limited to 1 year, so we have a new chair on that, and I got demoted to vice chair, which is fine with me. Then that afternoon, as Commissioner Ebinger reported on, we had the public outreach meeting. And again, it was our first presentation and plan vision by Jennifer Darling, who is our newly hired head of public outreach, or communications person. Thursday morning, we had the solid waste meeting. I'm not going to get in any more details. Commissioner Mojo also reported on that as well. I think the plans are moving along nicely, and Kirk once again went over the timeline of the process for the transfer station. That afternoon, we had the MCC JPA meeting, as Commissioner Mojo talked about, and the action items were approval of 3 different appraisals on different properties on the Clay County side, and that appraisal process just, it's the first step in, that just basically gives the value of the land, but then there becomes what extra compensation might be needing if they're required to move. Under the federal guidelines of projects, there has to be additional compensation depending on each individual circumstance of acquisition. So, so we did approve the appraisal, but that doesn't mean that those property owners will not see additional compensation. We also then had the Diversion Authority Board meeting that afternoon, virtual meeting. And again, it was kind of a repeat of some of the same stuff that we had through our committees. I don't believe there was really any formal action items on that given day. Friday morning, the intergovernmental retreat, I think went well for a virtual meeting. And then the afternoon, we had the CARES Act meeting that has been discussed, and we were able to really kind of work out the 7 categories that Steve talked about this morning, and the recommendation that came before all of you this morning. On Monday afternoon, I also attended the County Comprehensive Plan Study Committee. It's our first meeting of its kind, and there was basically going through what MetroCog's plan for that process will be. We had a lot of good input from Matt, and we had others present as well. So and they kind of shared a timeline of things to come on that as well. That concludes my report. Mr. Larson, are you ready for yours?
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. I also attended the PIC meeting that's been covered by both Commissioner Gross and Commissioner Campbell last Tuesday. Wednesday, we had county management and received a update from Kathy McKay on the COVID pandemic. We talked about the intergovernmental retreat, and also talked about some of the changes through the organizational chart changes for maintenance and custodial that Joe provided us an update with. That day, we also had the business relief discussions with both the commissioners on that committee and also commissioner members. That afternoon, I spoke with Darren on a series of issues related to the county. And we also met that afternoon with court officials to share some information with the courts based on some of the discussions we've had with our building committee. We're meeting again, I think, on Friday as a building committee to discuss further space needs here within the county. On the 28th, participated in the SWAC meeting that's been addressed by Commissioner Campbell and Commissioner Mojo. And also the MCC JPA meeting that's where it was addressed also. On the 29th, participated in the intergovernmental retreat. Again, I think our concern was how smoothly it would go. I'm very pleased with how the layout went and with our IT department. So we were able to work through that. Also, just a special thanks. This past year, we did, Clay County was the host for the Joint Powers Group, and so I want to thank outgoing Commissioner Haney, who was the chair of our committee this past year. Also, Commissioner Campbell for the great work he did moderating this past week. And then also important to thank Colleen. She really made sure that all of our meetings were scheduled and everything was in order over the last year, and certainly did a great job there. The 29th, we attended our coronavirus relief committee that's been addressed, and also toured the government center. We're working with Moorhead Public Service to try to ensure that we have our fiber going to that building so we can get in there as quickly as possible. Yesterday discussed a series of issues with Rhonda Porter, and also participated in the Clay County Comprehensive Plan and Transportation Study. I would note, just kind of following up on Gabe's comments, right now we do have, there is legislation in both the House. Representative Marquardt has been a champion for emergency management. He has a House Bill 499. And also Senator Eakin is a co-sponsor of a Senate File 534 to get an additional $3 million for emergency managers. And so I think that that's something that we've been encouraged to continue to provide support and knowing how important that is for us in our community. Also would just want to note, we did, there was a set of keys that were located at the Moorhead Center Mall that we have in our, here at the courthouse. We've posted on a number of Facebook pages, just to try to get the word out. But if someone's missing a set of keys, they can contact the courthouse, and if they can identify them, we'll get those back to them. And just lastly, I'd like to just thank everyone for the kind comments this morning, and especially for bringing up my first interview and drudging up that trauma.
We always will.
The Clay County has just.
We go into more detail on that?
No, I think that was good enough. No, Clay County has just been, it's been a great opportunity for me, both professionally and personally, and through the relationships that I have. I'm very proud to work for Clay County and a terrific organization. I think, we talked a great deal about the tremendous leadership of county administrators and over the last 40 years with Administrator Sethi and Berg. And I think it goes to, it's important to point out the important leadership of this board. Because I think one of the things that this board has consistently done over the years, provided us a good framework to operate under. While you may have differences in how you feel things should go, you always collaboratively work together for the betterment of the citizens. And so I think that's important to make sure that we point out. And don't let this gray hair fool you. I have an 11-year-old, so I'm looking forward to the next 25 years. So. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Commissioner Mojo has asked me to remind you that the registration for the legislative conference should be done, and that's on February 18th. So if you haven't done so, and if you're going to make that, you should probably get registered. With that, we now are scheduled to go into closed session for attorney-client privilege pursuant to Minnesota statute 130D-05 subsection 3B.
Mr. Chair, I'd make a motion to go into closed session.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Mojo, second by Commissioner Ebinger. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
You can just adjourn, okay. Oh, excuse me, to open it, do we have to open it?
No, we had a motion to open.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay,
Second.
all right, we are adjourned.